Hello, I'm George Mayhem, the Managing Editor of Vanilla Plus. Welcome to today's webinar, the topic of which is Less is More, how operators must evolve their network and IT monitoring tools towards a unified service assurance platform. This is a great topic because it affects all operators as they strive to increase automation, virtualize networks and prepare for 5G. Service assurance and the capability to achieve predictive operations at lower total cost of ownership are fundamental to the future success of our industry, so I'm delighted to welcome today's panel in association with Assure Now. I'll shortly hand over to Anil Rao, Principal Analyst at Analysys Mason, to set the scene and give his presentation. Anil will be joined by two operators who will share their experiences. These are Keith Casey, the Vice President of Technical Assistance Center at Alaskan operator GCI, and also Alan Rochford, the Director of Service Management at Irish operator AIR. I should point out that after the presentations, we will be taking questions from the audience, so please enter your question in the panel on your screen, and I'll put it to our panel at the end of the presentations. Now, with the theme that less is more in mind, I think it's time for less of me and more of Anil. Anil, over to you. The floor is yours.
Well said, Josh. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. You're looking at today's agenda here on the slide. So I will start off by setting the stage with the section on market disruption and why we think there is a need for consolidating and retiring legacy tools and basically moving towards a unified service assurance sort of a platform. And as George was saying, my presentation will be followed with two more presentations from our distinguished guests. One case study from GCI, which is looking at the before aspect of the they're looking to make the transformation. So let's listen from Keith on what are the factors that they're looking at and why they want to do this transformation. And then we'll move into the after case study where Alan will present the after scenario where they've already done some transformation, and we'll listen to Alan on some of the benefits that they have achieved by doing this transformation. So let's move swiftly to the first part of the presentation, where I will talk a little bit about why we need to do this and some of the use cases associated with unified service assurance. Let's look at the problem statement to start with, right? So we're talking about unified service assurance, but the problem that we're trying to solve is really, and this has been repeated a number of times, and in every conference and every discussion that we have with operators, they absolutely understand and appreciate that this is a problem that they tackle within the operations. And if you try to take a step back and try to understand this problem a little bit more better, it's really around disparate and siloed assurance tools that we are having to deal with today. But as you start looking at the future telecommunication service provider, and even many operators, envision to be a sort of a digital service provider where automation and a lower total cost of ownership and operational efficiencies and all these all fantastic things are some of the key pillars of a digital telco. Disparate and siloed assurance tools are exactly an antithesis to the principles of how a digital service provider should operate in the future. So what is the actual problem here? So on the left here, you see the picture of how typically networks have been deployed and the associated assurance systems have been implemented to monitor those networks. So here's an example of an operator. If you consider a mobile operator in this case, you would have an access network, which could be considered as domain 1. You have a core network, domain 2, backhaul, domain 3, and so on and so forth. And traditionally, we have deployed separate fault management and performance management systems as examples for each of these domains. And these are just, this is just a mobile network, and then you have multiple IT data centers that the operators have to deal with. And increasingly, operators are deploying their own cloud and offering cloud services to their customers. And they have their own private cloud deployments. So each of these, if you consider each of these as different network or infrastructure domains, you typically tend to have multiple assurance systems monitoring each of those domains. Now, what's the problem this creates? What are the drawbacks of such an approach? Is that clearly you're duplicating a number of these systems across, as you see in the picture. You have multiple fault management systems, multiple performance management systems. And the operations are having to deal with what we call as a swivel chair operational experience on a day-to-day basis, because they have to, if these systems are not integrated into a common user interface, they'll have to deal with multiple different screens as part of their troubleshooting processes on a day-to-day basis. And this sort of results in high troubleshooting times, and as calls come into the call center and get passed on to the network operations teams, they'll have to deal with, because they're having to deal with these multiple systems. First call resolution, one of the key KPIs, takes a hit, and ultimately results in poor customer experience. And of course, you could actually start thinking about integrating these systems, right? I mean, there's nothing stopping from integrating these systems and deploying a common user interface on top of these. But of course, to do this, you'll have to do a lot of bespoke development and employ a systems integrator to do it. There is, of course, high integration costs and all of this. So it is possible, but of course, there are high costs and potentially scalability issues in future. And ultimately, we can talk about network operations, we can talk about fantastic tools in the operations and so on. But if we don't have the ultimate goal of enhancing the service quality and customer experience, all of this would be an expensive experiment, right? So in doing all of this, we'll have to think about how do you enhance service quality, which is ultimately what the customer is experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And they don't really care whether you have 100 tools or 10 tools in your network operations. With a siloed operations approach, service quality management and customer experience tends to be an afterthought. So we'll have to think about all these issues as we go ahead. Moving on. So unified service assurance, so we've taken a look at the problems, the deployment scenarios, and what sort of drawbacks a siloed assurance approach has. And we're making an argument that a unified service assurance approach enables operators to solve some of those issues, but also look at some of the strategic business initiatives. What are these strategic business drivers? Today, talking to a lot of operators in our research, we find that churn reduction is absolutely an important strategic business driver, because in most of the developed markets and increasingly in many more markets, there are really no new customers to acquire. It's really poaching customers, right? Mobile penetration, for example, is already 100%, over 100%. Many households have multiple different devices. So it's really how well can you do in providing an excellent customer experience, so they don't churn away to your competitors. So it's an extremely important business driver. Virtualization and digital transformation. I briefly talked about the digital service provider vision that some of the operators have. Virtualization, network virtualization, which is NFV and SDN, and cloud-related transformations that are going on in the infrastructure is absolutely an important business driver. Improving operational efficiency, forever this has been a concern, and it continues to be so. As networks virtualize, it's going to be even more important to have an extremely efficient operations because the significant network complexities will not be cannot be managed through current approaches. We'll have to think about more and more automation approaches to sustain the operational expenses and so on and so forth. And ultimately, operators would want to constantly reduce the time to market for new services. Currently, it takes months to take a product from conception to launch. That is not going to be sustainable anymore as operators continue to compete with different types of alternate service providers. We all know who we're talking about. Usually we call them as the over-the-top service providers, but really, how fast can you launch new services and kill those services? If they're not profitable. So the life cycle of the services will have to be extremely short. And to contextualize all of these strategic business drivers in the discussion we're having today in terms of unified service assurance, we're talking about bringing together fault and event management, listed as FM, performance monitoring, PM, and service management systems, which sort of addresses the service quality management and customer experience management KPIs. These three systems will have to come together for network, cloud, and IT infrastructure domains, and increasingly as some parts of these infrastructures get virtualized, you're looking at a hybrid infrastructure scenario for a number of years to come, because virtual networks and physical networks will coexist. And then analytics will have to underpin each of these solutions, which will have to be fully integrated with each other. So when we say unified service assurance, we're talking about mainly these three components, which are underpinned by a common information model, a common topology, and so on and so forth, which can be and which should be sort of reused across these applications, PM, FM, and SM. And looking at the mapping those strategic business drivers to some of the tactical business drivers, which are some of the concerns that a lot of operators will have to address today while they are trying to achieve these strategic business objectives. Basic things, these are really still important in the network operations, and you will hear Keith and Alan talk about this even more, is that how do you reduce the mean time to resolution and increase first call resolution? I talked about it in the previous slide. How do you reduce the total cost of ownership? If you have multiple different tools and systems across multiple domains, it's absolutely going to be a high total cost of ownership, because it's not just the systems licenses that you're paying out, but it's also operating them, training people every time there's a new release of those products. So it tends to be a higher total cost of ownership to operate multiple different systems. So how do you rationalize systems and processes? This is an ongoing debate, and it's going to be even more important as networks become virtualized, because you can't really continue to have, create another silo just for the NFV SDN network domains, because you end up just replicating the problem, if not improving it. In implementing predictive operations, unified service assurance can play a significant role, and I'll come to these in the next couple of slides, because again, talking about the NFV scenario, if you're not able to sort of preempt issues, and not just NFV actually, even today in the physical networks, in the context of churn reduction, operators are considering predictive operations because they don't want to having to be in a situation where they're reacting to problems all the time. They want to identify service quality degradations even before they occur, so they can start thinking about some sort of predictive operations, and obviously analytics plays a significant role here. Improving network automation, and this is where NFV and SDN scenarios are extremely important, because as the network complexity, with the network significantly high network complexity in NFV SDN networks, it is going to be humanly impossible to use people or an army of people to continue to monitor and take remediation action. So automation has to be one of the ways to do this. And two other important objectives are, I talked about churn reduction. Improving customer experience continues to be an important driver even today, tactical as well as strategic. And in that context, many operators are considering and even implementing service operation center, which is a more of a service-oriented and customer experience-oriented operations rather than a inward-looking network operation-centric approach. So unified service assurance really is trying to address some or all of these tactical and strategic business drivers. So let's take a look at a couple of those that I briefly mentioned. So here's an example of how, in the case of mobile operator, as they have deployed 2G and going into 3G and 4G, it is well known that they are constantly increasing the capex as they move into new generations of these mobile networks. But it's really the question of OpEx as well. So if you look at the purple line graph here, as you sort of start to stabilize on a network, 2G in this case, 2G second generation networks, and then you're ready to deploy 3G, and then the OpEx shoots up as well. And as 3G starts to stabilize, you're ready for 4G, and we all know we're already talking about 5G, and even before that we have NFV SDN to contend with. So every time the OpEx starts to stabilize, there is something new happening, and the OpEx shoots up again. So with the unified service assurance, there is a potential to sort of break that trend, break that curve, so to speak. So there is, of course, an initial high investment to deploy unified service assurance, but you should be able to see flattening or even slowing of that OpEx as you go into new generations of networks and start to deploy NFV or 5G in future. In terms of the predictive operations that I talked about, and as you increase the unification of service assurance and continuously apply more and more analytics, you should be able to achieve what we call as the predictive operations, and that's the ultimate goal. Today, many operators are still in the reactive stage where there is high mean time to repair and low first call resolution percentage. And increasing unification of service assurance should enable operators to move towards a proactive approach. And ultimately, with more analytics, you should be able to do predictive operations. I talked a little bit about automation earlier, and I've tried to depict what it actually means. So if you look at what we have today, in the case of a siloed service assurance scenario, on the left side you have a lot of the different PM and FM systems which receive data, network metrics from the network and the IT infrastructure, which is sort of used, using different screens and user interfaces by the operations, and they do a lot of manual troubleshooting, and then they apply the configuration changes back into the network, which tend to be mostly manual. And optimization teams, planning and optimization teams, also use this information to do, as part of their day-to-day job, to continuously optimize the network. And most of these activities tend to be manual. And potentially, with a unified service assurance solution, you could look at automating some of these remediation and troubleshooting actions, because you have a more unified view of what's going on in the network, a more end-to-end view, and it gets easier to apply analytics more centrally rather than having to do that on multiple different silos of the assurance system. So So you could look at first a guided automation, and then ultimately move towards a closed loop automation as you build trust in the automation algorithms. Ultimately, that's where we want to get to, which is the autonomous operations with NFV, SDN, and 5G. I talked a little bit about Service Operations Center, and this is, trying to depict the concept in a more illustrative manner. So if you see today, there are two teams which are predominantly network-facing. We have the Network Operations Center and the engineering, planning and engineering teams, who are predominantly head-down, network-focused, infrastructure-focused. Whereas the customer care and marketing teams are predominantly customer-focused, right? So they're taking calls in the call center, listening to the customer's complaints and trying to resolve them, or marketing team coming up with new offers, new bundles, and so on and so forth, looking at new ways to generate revenue. And traditionally, we've had a big gap in what the customer care and marketing view as the, what the customer experience is, and what the network operations and the engineering teams see as the network performance. So there's been a big gap, a sort of a blind spot, so to speak. And Service Operations Center is really what sits in the middle and tries to address this gap in what the customer's experiencing and what the network's telling you is its performance. So Unified Service Assurance sort of empowers Service Operations Center in a way to make this transition from a network-centric view of the network to of the operations to a more service and customer experience centric. Right. At this stage, I'd like to hand over to Keith Casey from GCI, who is sort of has looked at some of the challenges. Obviously, being an operator, hopefully he'll provide a little bit more insight on some of the challenges that I've talked about, and he'll talk a little bit more about what he's planning to do about these challenges. Keith, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Anil, and thank you for having me today. Real quick, just an intro to myself. I'm Keith Casey. I'm a Vice President of the Technical Assistance Center for GCI, carrier, quad plate carrier up in the great state of Alaska. 30 years experience in communications with 12 years airborne and special operations communications in the U.S. Army, and then 18 years of carrier-grade technical experience with operations and engineering. I'm going to quickly run through who is GCI, GCI's TAC, our challenges, and why we chose AssureNow and AirTech as our solution provider and partner to resolve these challenges. So GCI is the largest communications provider in Alaska. We are a quad plate carrier providing a range of services and products, including wireless, data, video, voice. We're the primary roaming network in Alaska, and we have several managed customers as well. So we are the technical assistance center for several other carriers as well. Our facilities include undersea fiber optic cable, as well as the ability to utilize satellite and hybrid microwave fiber, what we call Terra. It's terrestrial for rural Alaska, networks to reach isolated communities through rural Alaska. We have a very diverse situation in the state of Alaska, where over 75% of the state is in a very rural village type situation. So we have a complex network to provide communications to those small villages out in rural Alaska. The TAC is, we upgraded our traditional Tier 1 2 NOC to a Tier 2, 3 TAC approximately 2 years ago when I came on board at GCI. Our primary focus on higher availability and a better mean time to X stats, so mean time to repair, mean time to communicate, mean time to notify, identify, All those stats is really our focus to get to a higher availability within our network for a better customer experience. Some of our challenges, given the geography and the spread out nature of the community we serve, we have the ability, or we have to be able to identify, respond, and resolve issues both on and off the road networks spread out over a state twice the size of Texas and 1/5 the size of the lower 48. I put this map over the lower 48 to really give everybody an idea of the geography of Alaska and how large it really is. When you look at it on a globe, it tends to not really show its size, and so this is really a size up over the lower 48 of the United States to show you really how large the state of Alaska is and what our challenges are. Conventional 911 capabilities do not apply in Alaska. If a call is dropped, an officer cannot simply drive to many locations. Therefore, we have to get it right the first time and identify 911 issues before they affect our community, which this was our primary focus. It was in the front end of this, we actually have launched 911 in our AssureNow platform. Through multiple business acquisitions over 40 years, GCI TAC has accrued approximately 150 different and generally single-purpose tool sets to monitor the health of the many services we provide. Business requirements across different platforms are unified, but the platforms and systems do not communicate with each other, resulting in data loss and unnecessary wasted man hours. A large number of the tasks are not automated, requiring technicians to have an in-depth knowledge to perform really human correlation and filtering, creating single points of failure and wasted time and resources, resulting in really an elongated mean time to restore. And this is just another map showing also our fiber facilities that are across the state of Alaska. I wanted to show both the state of Alaska here, but then also what we're talking about in miles of fiber that has been ran both undersea and terrestrial. So GCI spent considerable time identifying, GCI and I, with a large team, what systems, tools, programs were available, and then did an extensive cost-benefit analysis against the organizational needs. Dedicated time was spent in discovery to better understand our internal systems, tools, and processes. This helped us to understand where we were investing our time and energy and what tools could be transitioned, synchronized, replaced, or ultimately sunsetted. We requested bids from competitors along with proposal plans. Ultimately, we decided to go with our vendor of choice, AssureNow, AirTech, based on their extensive portfolio, vendor experience, and demonstrated capability with large telecommunications companies, ultimately having like-for-like challenges as GCI does. Our business benefits ran the spectrum, but could be summarized by reducing unnecessary energy through optimizing and streamlining systems, tools, and processes into a unified platform, really focused on a single dashboard or single pane of glass, as I would call it, environment. And that's really our big focus right now, is to how do we get to a single pane of glass with that 150 plus tools in our toolbox, with all those windows across the floor of a functional desk type TAC environment. It is a complex and challenging environment to troubleshoot and identify and correlate and filter using human interaction rather than automation. As Ronald Reagan once said, status quo, is Latin for the mess we're in. So I wanted to really focus on what's the mess we're in. Organizational internal hurdles are often more challenging to overcome than external ones. We had to not only take a microscope to the way we do things today, but ask ourselves why we do it that way, and if we have to. Previous acquisitions were run as independent divisions, often maintaining their own systems such as billing, maintenance, and tracking. Standardization across all divisions was minimal, resulting in divergent technologies, competing priorities, overwhelming maintenance and security requirements, and the ever-growing possibility of something failing that resulted in lack of resources available who knew how to work it. The ever-changing environment of a 40-year company comes down to the SMEs and those folks ultimately retiring. We have a tenure that's about 15 years on an average at GCI. And when you're giving out, I actually was in an all-hands meeting last week that gave out 35-year tenure awards to 4 employees. So we have a staff that is also our SMEs who are close to retirement or have retired. So getting to a state that we can manage those legacy equipment before we sunset that equipment, which is part of our 5-year plan here, is a necessity to get to that single pane of glass in a simplified environment. Reason we're consolidating, consolidation enabled us to rid ourselves of the overwhelming number of tools while reducing the institutional knowledge required to teach new technicians which tools to look for and when an incident happens. It enabled the TAC to simplify and optimize the dashboard in order to improve mean time to identify, notify, and resolve those incidents. Consolidation also meant we were always looking. We became able to identify incidents before they happened through threshold monitoring, enabling us to put into motion the required steps to bypass the incident before it occurred. So this is a view of our transformation timeline, and really our focus, we've done a lot of discovery on the ground. We've spent a lot of time on the front end of this to really put this into place into a timeline that we could meet and hopefully exceed. And so it began as a 24-month transformation through organizational demands, many programs. Tools were added to the manager system for optimization and integration. While this extended our initial timeline, it also had a result in continued organizational buy-in for process improvement and leveraging technology to solve problems. Our major milestones are core network. We have a program called Polaris. This is where we're taking 4 billing systems into one, clouding that up, and so we're using Assure Now to be our transactional puller for our billing system. We want to tie in revenue to customer experience and really get to the true service assurance shop that we're focused on. And then we're going into our transport, HFC cable network, IT end-to-end, all our voice over IP, voice over Wi-Fi, meta switches, IT in a synthetic environment as well. So each of these are mapped out in the next year. We've got this out to about Q2 2019 at this point, and we're really focused on the priority networks to get to that single pane of glass. So the proof of concept is broken into 4 main components. Effort and duration is 3 weeks providing on-site effort and integration. Project scope includes validation of the monitoring systems, inter-process communication between the core and edge networks, as well as integration with GCI devices, routers, switches, ASA. Resources internally selected included GCI TAC technicians, SMG wireless, so the switch wireless, and engineering, representatives to assess systems from all sides of the network. And then finalizing acceptance criteria ensures the effective communication between core and edge networks to the 4 main processes: fault management, performance management, discovery and topology, and of course the presentation layer. This is ensuring that the TAC will enable to be operational, effective, and monitor systems from a single point of reference. And this is primarily our biggest challenge right now. So to wrap it up, we've partnered with AirTech as our deployment partner, whom is actually in market now. They've been here for about 3 weeks, doing an extensive discovery, an extended discovery to our discovery, and helping us get this into a phased approach that makes sense. So we're really looking at the efficiency of deployment, starting with our core working out to the edge. So we're really excited about AirTech being on board. They're very knowledgeable folks, and I've spent a lot of time with Air out in Ireland doing the research on this, and then spending a lot of time with the AirTech folks as well on the ground, boots on the ground here in Alaska. So I think that sums it up. Neil?
Yeah, thank you for that, Keith. So we'll move on to Alan now, who's going to talk to us about the lessons learned and the benefits they've achieved, with their transformation. Alan, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Thank you, Keith. I suppose I included this slide really to just set a context for Air. It's just one quarter's results, so it gives you an indication of where we are. It shows the revenue and EBITDA targets and achievements we've met, the progress we are making around fibre to the home and fibre to the cabinet deployments. As with Keith, we're a quad play operator. We have a TV operation. We have a dedicated content arm that would look towards the content we will provide. And in the Irish context, there is a particular feature around Irish sport, around GAA football and hurling, which would be very attractive in the Irish market. Post-pay mobile subscriptions, etc. So we're progressing heavily with fibre to the home and fibre to the cabinet. We're progressing in a 300,000 home premises deployment in fibre to the home, pushing ahead with 4G, where we've 95% population coverage. We're very much focused on convergence, so voice over Wi-Fi, etc., and how we leverage benefits out of the modem in the home with the Wi-Fi and the broadband, and how we can leverage that into the mobile bundles, etc. And we've a number of new non-exec directors on our board. That's probably a year ago now at this stage, really. But it gives you an indication of where Air is. We have geographic challenges, but nothing on the scale of Keith. And I'll come back to some of the kind of challenges we get exposed to. We had an ex-Hurricane Ophelia come up from the Caribbean and hit us there not just about a month ago. So I'll talk you through how Monolith helped us deal with the preparation for, response to, and recovery from a major storm event. So we had, again, very similar to Keith, we had a chief technology officer who initiated a review of our operational support systems and instant and event monitoring systems. We had approximately 70, just over 70 tools that were out there, Smart, InfoVista, Netcool, MRTG, SolarWinds, etc., that came from 3 organizations. We were a fixed incumbent telco, we acquired a mobile operator, and our IT directorate had its own strategy at one time in the past. So we had a very broad suite of tools monitoring the internal systems, external customer services, and the network elements and systems that provided those services to our customers. So at the opposite extreme to the single pane of glass that Keith refers to, I used to say the people who worked for me in our service management centre on a 24/7, 365 basis almost needed to be like an insect, in that they needed segmented eyes. They were looking at 4, 5, 6 multiple panes of glass and trying to understand what was happening to a customer service based on that very varied data set that they were being presented with. So our journey towards a single service management centre, away from 5 sites and 3 rotas, one being mobile, one being fixed and one being IT, to a single rota and a single site in a single service management centre, was very much supported by the deployment of Monolith, again supported by Airtech. And what I would say is, in that journey, it is crucial when you make a vendor and partner selection around your systems that it is a partnership, because it is only through a partnership, I believe, you can deliver a successful project of this nature, because there are going to be highly complex challenges that will be posed to the organizations, both in delivering and accepting these systems. And it's only through a partnership, I think, you can make it a success. So we've moved to a single site, single rota. We've moved to that while achieving very substantial headcount reduction. So at the outset of the journey, we had of the order of 114 people working on 3 rotas over 5 sites. Our initial step and transition was to 70 people working on rotas, and we've now moved to a situation where we have 49 people running our 24/7, 365 organisation. So we've done a substantial cost reduction exercise in moving to a single rota. So we had very siloed assurance and management systems, as I've mentioned. We made a strategic decision to work with ITIL as our best practice model. We moved to a single system to deliver our view of the services and networks under our control. And in doing that, we delivered cost reduction. But in addition to that cost reduction, that is the challenge that's posed to, I think, every operator today, we also delivered service improvement. So what I would say is, in terms of our 2 primary SLAs, we have a premium and a standard SLA. At a very simple level, if you think of our premium SLA, we work to repair 90% of faults in 6 o'clock hours, 24/7, 365. In our standard SLA, people would buy service that we work to repair 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 business hours, and not the weekends. In the transition to the single system for monitoring and quantifying impacts, we have managed to improve our standard SLA performance over the last 2 to 3 years, where we are now, in the year, we achieved our standard SLA performance in the year, in our financial year 16-17, that ended in June 17. So we've not only reduced cost, we've actually improved performance. And that's a major achievement for us, and one we hope to continue. So, as I've said, one of the big things for us is to try and focus on the customer and the customer experience and the quality of the experience. We have consolidated the systems, given our 24/7, 365 teams a single view that allows them to look at how our customer experience is impacted by various network elements. We continue to strive towards drawing on all of the myriad of network element managers we would have there and consolidating all of the incident and event telemetry into Monolith. And we actually intend to perform the next Monolith upgrade, hopefully in the next number of months, and move forward to the next phase of our service tree development, quality of experience monitoring, and consolidation of Monolith with Remedy, which is our ticketing system of choice. So, as I've mentioned, we made very substantial cost savings in our 24/7 organisation, but we also, in the aggregate across all of service management, so I would have approximately 200 field engineers, 100 engineers who work in the centre in assurance, fulfilment, and on a 365 basis. I have service level management into our wholesale and retail arms, as we're a regulated operator, as we were the fixed incumbent telco. We've reduced our OPEX by approximately 20%. We have reduced our OSS systems in terms of legacy monitoring by of the order of 100 systems. And as a small anecdote, after 16 years of Netcool being in operation, the operational support teams, the last thing the server did before it was powered off was send me an email saying goodbye from Netcool after 16 years. And the reason I mention that anecdote is I try to get across to people, don't underestimate the challenges of the human change here. When people have been using a system, be it Netcool or EMC Smarts or InfoVista, etc., or Monolith, for a large amount of time, you have to understand when you make a change initiative that changes that system, you have to understand the impact to the people and how they respond to it. And the little anecdote about Netcool and the server sending me an email was a useful one that reminded me to always think about how you're impacting your people. In delivering Monolith, we significantly reduced our time to market for new services. So LTE, IPTV, NGA, and our current focus is very much in the next generation access, fibre to the home, fibre to the cabinet space, fibre to the home being the major one now. And it really aids us in deploying, monitoring, adopting new technologies and new services. We most definitely have improved visibility of our services on an end-to-end basis because we're not looking across that myriad of systems. As I mentioned it, and because of the power savings on the number of servers we were able to actually remove from service, we were actually eligible for some green tax rebates, etc., in terms of our CapEx deployment. So on that, I think I'll hand back to Anil, and thank you for taking the time to listen.
Excellent. Thanks, Alan, for your insightful presentation, and thank you, Keith, as well. So we heard we heard two sides of the story here. So one is from an operator who is just about getting into the journey, starting the journey of transformation towards a unified service assurance, and one from an operator who has done this and is reaping the benefits. So by and large, overall, if you look at why the telecommunications industry and the operators, telecommunications industry and operators must look at unified service assurance as a way to improve customer experience on everything that we talked about. This is a slide just to summarize how unified service assurance addresses some of the challenges explained by both Keith and Alan today. First call resolution and mean time to resolution are absolutely important, are some of the two of the most important parameters or KPIs that operations are measured. So unified service assurance at the minimum addresses these two KPIs. Customer experience and total cost of ownership absolutely important, and in terms of the strategic business drivers and tactical business drivers that I was explaining, and as illustrated by the two speakers, absolutely important as well. Increasingly, process automation and time to market are going to be even more important. They are important even today, but as we look at next generation services, NFV, 5G, and so on, these two objectives become even more important, and these are some of the benefits that unified service assurance can help operators achieve. On that note, I will hand the control back to George, who has a poll question.
Great, thank you very much, Anil, and thanks to the other speakers too. We thought it'd be interesting to have a poll question with the audience now, because I think that will be a good thing just to gauge what we've learned and also to set the scene for the Q&A that will follow. The question is, does your organization plan to mitigate the future risks of new technology adoption, and that could be NFV, 5G, virtualization, or a hybrid of those things, through OSS-BSS transformation by acquiring new technology and replacing old tools? And the possible answers are currently in transformation, will do so in the next 12 months, will do so in the next 2 to 4 years, will do so in the next 5 to 10 years, or finally, no plans. So the question is, does your organization plan to mitigate the future risks of new technology adoption through OSS-BSS transformation by acquiring new technology and replacing old tools? And the options are currently in transformation, will do so in the next 12 months, will do so in the next 2 to 4 years, will do so in the next 5 to 10 years, or we have no plans. And just before we show the results, thanks to those who have sent in questions already, but do feel free to send in some further questions for our panel. We won't have long left, but I'll try and get as many answered as possible. So let's look at the results of that poll. And I think it's no surprise that just over 60% of respondents are currently in transformation. And this seems to be a pretty strong trend, certainly looking into the next 2 to 4 years. It looks like the vast majority of our poll respondents will be in transformation. However, there's 18% or so that have no plans to get into that transformation to mitigate the future risks. And I guess that's open to various different interpretations. Great, excellent. Let's move on and open the floor to questions. I have a question that's come in, which is, how do you reconcile the unified service assurance proposition against the approach of data lakes and analytics that we are seeing from the enterprise? And I guess, Anil, that would be an interesting one. How do you view that question, and what would your response be?
Okay. So how do you reconcile the unified SA proposition against the approach of data lakes and analytics? Well, it's complementary, if anything, to be honest, because I mentioned in my part of the presentation that analytics is going to be an absolutely important underpinning of the unified service assurance solutions, because one of the things that the unified SA empowers operations to do is automation. Now, automation, it's a loaded word, right? I mean, but really, if you take a step back and understand how do you drive automation, you need, at the absolute minimum, you need accurate trigger points to trigger an automation routine, and you need policies around that. So how do you accurately identify those trigger points? Are really through analytics. So they are complementary. As you start thinking about implementing unified service assurance, you need to start thinking about evolving your analytics as well. At the minimum, you need to start thinking about, first of all, how do you start automating, the basic runbooks in the operations, right? And how do you trigger those automation trigger points and apply policies? So that's absolutely minimum, and you start with that. And then, AI and machine learning, again, AI is we like to talk about it a lot, but really we're talking about what we call as the unsupervised learning, where the system takes decisions on behalf of the humans, right? But that's not going to happen overnight, and this is where machine learning comes into play. And you need to train the system, the machine learning algorithms, with a lot of the historical data, and you have to continually tune those algorithms to a point where it can start to take real-time data coming in from the unified SA and the original data sources in the network. It can take all of the real-time telemetry data and apply those learnings and patterns to make those decisions and eventually trigger those automation routines. So it is complementary. It needs to evolve. Both the unified SA and the analytics has to evolve in parallel, and they need to work together extremely closely.
Thanks, Anil. I've got another question in. This will be to the operator speakers, Keith and Alan. The question is, how do both speakers feel with their new rationalised tool sets and processes in the light of the revolutionary approach of SDN and NFV and the new DevOps and Agile tool sets? Keith, how do you feel about your rationalised tool sets and processes?
Yeah, so in our current state, we're in a very chaotic environment with the tool sets. So coming into this single pane of glass, more efficient tool set, in the light of it, we're also using ITIL framework to build our processes and how we build our service assurance world that we're really focused on getting to as quickly as possible. But yeah, it takes a real partnership, as Alan stated earlier, with a company like AirTech, who can come in with the experience of development and really partner, the tool and optimize that tool to what it's going to do for us, how it's going to resolve our issues and our challenges with the 150 plus tools in our toolbox today, and that legacy equipment, and how we can quickly move to sunsetting as many of those tools as possible. I'm really excited to see the stats that Alan put out, where they were able to turn down 100 tools in their toolbox. That is a huge improvement. And if you, just like Alan stated, the employee experience is number one for us as well. You can't have a great customer experience until you have a great employee experience. We are in a very chaotic employee experience. And so I'm really focused on how that gets there. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. I'll just move on to Alan to ask you the same question. Alan, how do you feel about your new rationalised tool sets and processes in the light of SDN, NFV, DevOps, and Agile tool sets?
I'll answer this in two ways. Okay, so we had a hurricane, as I mentioned earlier, come across the southern tip of our country. Now, thank God it had lost some of its strength as it crossed the cold Atlantic. But over the space of a Friday, when we picked up the weather forecast that it was tracking towards us, calls on a Saturday and Sunday preparing for it, deploying mobile generators to the southern tip of the country, preparing our staff, putting them to place of safety as it traversed the country, and then redeploying people as it was safe for them to work. Monolith is integrated with our electricity supply board, so we do some screen scraping data and gathering from our electricity supply boards data to allow us to know where power is out. So that allowed us to move generators to right locations. What I will say is, having the one pane of glass now means we were able to respond to, and from a core perspective, recover from what started out as a hurricane in 4.5 days. So we started off Monday morning, 6 a.m. It hit the southern tip of the country. And by 4 p.m. on the Friday afternoon, we were able to stand down from storm response mode within 4.5 days. Now that was only possible 3 reasons. One, extraordinary efforts by our teams. Being able to go to the right site at the right time with the right equipment to restore the service or maintain the service. And, great work by a couple of my managers, right? So the one pane of glass, the one view, gives you one truth, and you respond to that truth as well as you can. I actually look forward to virtualization, the various functions being virtualized, the network elements, etc. In some ways, I don't know if it's an unspoken battle. I think it's a journey we're going to go on together. And every time somebody creates something that can't be monitored and a customer has it and it breaks and we don't know about it, anybody who developed it is going to learn very quickly. The customer wants the service there 24/7, 365. And actually probably wants us to know it's broken before they do and get out there and fix it before it hurts them. So I think it'll only be a battle once, because once somebody develops something that can't be assured or can't be delivered or can't be maintained to the customer's expectation, they won't be developing a second one, in my opinion. But that's from somebody, and I'm not as experienced as Keith. I've only 18 years in operations. And I can tell you, I've had the customers who are not happy talk to me, and you really don't want them to talk to you twice. So I think it'll be a journey where people will learn to give the customer what they want.
Great. Thank you very much, Alan. Okay. I'm afraid we've run out of time, so it only remains for me to say thank you very much to today's panel. Anil Rao from Analysis Mason, Keith Casey from GCI over in Alaska, and Alan Rochford from AIR in Ireland. It's been really exciting to get 2 operators together along with an analyst on today's webinar, and I'm very grateful for Assure Now for making that happen for us. Thanks very much for attending. I hope you found it interesting. I certainly did. Have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.